3D Snow White Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish. Hi everyone! In today's video I'm going to be doing a three-dimensional Snow White design, and actually the top part of it is not 3D, it's just flat and it's hand painted, and it says Snow White and there's two little birdies above it, and then Snow White herself below is 3D. And I tried to do almost exclusively use brushes from Ejuibas that I got in this kit, but for the three-dimensional stuff I did actually use my 3D brush that I love dearly just because I'm used to it and I knew it would end well that way, and using the other ones I wasn't quite so sure. But the brush kit is amazing. I can't stress that enough. The brushes themselves aren't, like, the handles aren't super high quality and everything, but the kit's not that expensive, and you get a whole bunch of brushes, and you get silicone tools, and you get dotting tools, and it comes in a case that folds up. And so if you're traveling tech, that would be awesome to have, just because it's all there, all wrapped up in one. And so in this video, for the larger 3D stuff, I am using the acrylic brush that comes in the kit, and then all of the detail brushes, and I also use some of the silicone tools for that. So definitely check out this kit. There'll be more in it in just a second. And don't forget to click subscribe to see my future videos as well. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the kit that I did get from Ejuibas, and like I said, it folds up and it's got magnetic clasps. And so this is awesome, and it's got little plastic pieces so that the brushes can't fall out, and also if there's any residue on them, it's not going to get all over the case. And so the silicone tools are double-ended. They've got little silicone on the one end, and then there's a dotting tool on the other. This is the acrylic brush, and you'll see all the brushes that I'm using closer up as I'm using them. But like I said, the handles themselves are wooden, and then they've just got the little the metal that's about 1.5 inches or so up the handle, just to protect from especially monomer on that brush. But this brush kit has the hugest variety, and like there's that one that I've been drooling over. A different company has a brush that is for doing smile lines. It's a smile line brush. And I haven't seen them for very long, and I saw that one. I'm like, ooh, I can't wait. I can't believe this has that too. So that was exciting. And like I said, I am such a geek for brushes. I'm actually a geek for all kinds of artsy stuff, but like for brushes, this was the most exciting thing I have gotten in a very long time. Okay, so I'm using the acrylic brush that comes in the kit, and I'd say it's probably about a size 6. Generally speaking, I use a size 8, and it's a little deceptive to look at the size of it compared to this nail, because this is a size it's either a 1 or a 2 size tip, which is a really quite large nail. And so seeing this teeny tiny brush, which really isn't that small, it just looks like it's dwarfed. But the brush itself, I'd say, is about a 6. And that's a nice size for doing some things, like especially for doing smile lines. Sometimes a littler brush is nice to have that for sculpting smile lines. And so I did that, and I first started with a layer of yellow acrylic, and then I added a layer of some gold, or some not gold, but yellow glitter. And the brush itself did a beautiful job with this acrylic sculpting. The bristles themselves are a little thicker than a more expensive brush, but when you look at the price for it, it's a very good deal. And like I've said this when I've tried other brushes in the past, if you get a less expensive brush, just to try out the size and get a feel for how that size works for you, how the shape works for you, then you have a better idea when you go to buy a more expensive brush, because you know what you like and you haven't wasted all kinds of money. So I also encased the nail with a layer of clear, but now I'm going to go through and file it with a 180 grit file, and then buff it with a 240 grit padded buffer. You definitely want to buff since there's going to be more hand painting, and that's really going to make the painting go a lot smoother and easier. So now, to do the painting, I'm going to be using, this is the medium length striper style brush that came in the kit, and so I'm going to be using that brush and some dark blue paint and write Snow White about 1/3 down the nail. And so the brushes, I was looking at them, and generally speaking, I do cut brushes. I like to personalize them. But these ones, there's a huge variety, and some of them are a little larger than others. And there's a couple that are just so tiny that they're actually smaller than what I normally cut my brushes to, which is good. I don't always cut them to the size that I like. As progressively as you use a brush, you are going to lose bristles, so it's going to get smaller and smaller as time goes on. So I like in the beginning to cut them on a little bit of the large side, but the brushes are really nice and small, especially, I don't know if you can see how teeny tiny those are. And all of the striper brushes seem to have the same width to them. They're just different lengths. And you don't want to cut a brush's length because the bristles themselves taper at the top, and that's really going to help you with the painting. So you don't want to lose that. You want to make sure you keep that intact. So you can cut hairs totally off from around the brush, just not off the top, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to be using a combination of a little detail brush that's a little wider and a little shorter. That's that one right there. And then that striper brush that I was using before. So I'm just going to use those two brushes and I'm going to paint the little birds up above. So they have brown on their, blue on their back and brown on their underside of the wings and on their stomach, which from this angle you're kind of looking up at the bird, so you just see a little bit hints of the blue on top of his head, tops of the wings and his tail. So most of it you see is brown, and there's just a little bit of yellow, pale yellow on his tummy too. So then I went through and I just added an orange beak, but then some black details, and I used some darker brown to outline the brown areas and darker blue to do some outlines and details on the blue. But for the most part I just painted my little birdie, keeping him as simple as I could and giving him a white eye. And then just go through, add details. And for these two little birds, they are really quite small, and so if they're not perfect, that's okay, at least for me. But you want to try to, add as many details in that small space as you can. And so then I'm going to be adding a second little bird. And if you're doing this on, say, a smaller nail, or if you're doing like a set, you could definitely split up this design onto more than one nail. So you could put birds on a nail and make them a little larger if that's easier for you to paint. And you could put Snow White maybe across two nails. That would make that larger and easier to paint. And then do the 3D Snow White on a single nail. That would keep the design, but just spread it out so it's maybe a little easier to do. And then that gives you a whole hand. And so I painted the second birdie with a slightly different body shape. So his wings are both up, not sort of soaring down. And then I'm just going to add a layer of some glossy gel sealer over the top of it, make that really shiny. And so now I'm going to be sculpting my 3D Snow White. So this is the sculpting, or the little 3D sculpting brush that I owned from before that I'm going to be using for this. But I'm going to start with a white shape for her face. And so I'm just going to pat that out, and I kind of kept messing with that for a very long time. I never was quite happy with the shape of her face until finally I just gave in. And once you start adding hair and stuff, the shape of the face, it's important, don't get me wrong, but it's not as important because all those facial features are really going to define the recognizability of your design. And I'm going to add her neck and shoulder area. All of these areas I'm adding first with white are because if you were to go through, especially for me, the cover pink that I have isn't completely opaque. It's sort of like a jelly type color, so you can sort of see through it, not completely though, if that makes sense. So if you add a white base underneath it, that's going to make it so that all of the flesh tones really show up nicely and don't have a slight yellow hue. And then after I have her face in place, her collar of her dress kind of is really tall and it curves up and around her head. So I'm going to be adding that now because her hair is going to go on top of it as well as parts of the dress. So I'm just going to add that with the white at the moment. I do have the white out. And as you can see, I went through with that silicone tool and just carved out the shape because that part of that is just going to have kind of like it's going to curve around so you see it in two pieces, if that makes sense. And I added just a little blue in the back area. And so I'm going to be adding the cover pink over her face. And so much of this design, I was intending to do some sculpting with the silicone tools. That was my plan in the beginning, but I'm so used to just using my brush that I kind of forgot about it. And so I didn't use them too much in this particular video. However, you will see in coming videos, there's the poinsettia hair clip that I'm going to be uploading sometime before Christmas. And same with the Christmas tree that I'll be uploading eventually. Those ones I use the silicone tools a lot because I was sculpting something on a nail form backing and then picking it up. That is where I see these tools are so helpful when you are doing that. That was amazing. They are like my new best friend now. It made the process so easy and it was really nice for that, especially the flat one. I like that flat one. And yeah, and for making flowers, those silicone tools are amazing. And I also use them for chromifying something, but I don't remember what that was. Oh, for chroming a snowflake that I did. That'll be on the snowflake design. So you'll see me using them progressively in different videos and probably more and more as I find all the uses for them. So now as I'm yammering on about who knows what, I forgot to mention that I am now adding her hair with black, but I'm sure that you could have been watching that and ignoring what I'm saying, but I just added her hair with black, as I just said, with acrylic, and I did it in section just because I think it's easier, and especially with black, you don't want to get, say, black on her face where you don't want it because it's going to leave this smudge there, and so you want to make sure you do it sort of slow and steady so that you make sure that you have enough time to keep morphing it and playing with it until you're happy with it before it sets. And I also then took red and created just a slight little headband between the front of her hair and the back of her hair. And then I am going to be making a bow, and I was trying to use the silicone tool with this. However, at that particular moment, I didn't quite have the whole process down yet with the silicone tools, and the bow didn't turn out quite as well as I'd have liked. But you still get the idea. And then I'm going to add the little dot for the center of the bow, and then just touch up that collar of her dress. And like I said, I'm sure now that I have played with the silicone tools more than I did when I did this design, I would have a much better experience making that bow on her head, and it probably would have turned out just fine. And it didn't necessarily turn out bad, just not quite as clean as I would have liked it to be. So now, using a medium blue, I'm going to be adding the bodice of her dress. So I'm going to start just along the neckline and create that. And at this point, that part of the dress, I'm not worrying about it being three-dimensional. I mean, it's acrylic, so it is 3D, but the different high and low planes, I'm not gonna focus on making those too much. I'll add a little bit of thickness in a second to the areas that really need to stand out. So I'm just going to take that all the way down. The area, I don't have enough of her showing that the skirt of her dress is going to show, which I think is good because it'll just disappear in the yellow background. But now I'm going to be adding a little bit of thickness to her chest of the bodice just to, give her a nice shape. And then using a lighter shade of blue, I'm going to be adding the cuffs or the sleeves, I guess, of her dress. So I'm just going to lay down a bead of light blue and then go and do it on this other side. And then after I have them in place, I'm going to take my brush, since they will at that point turned ever so slightly matte. So once I have the shape in a good way, I'll just take the brush and then morph them a little bit, but I'll do more of that later on too with another bead. So I'm going to take some white acrylic and I'm going to be shaping her arms. So I'm just going to take white, carry that down the length of her body as far as it goes. Like I said, there's not really too much showing there, so there's not I can't speak. Not much for her arms either. So I'm just going to add whatever I can there, and then I will cover those up with the Cover Pink, just like I did with her face. And for the same reason, especially if you were to cover, say, a little bit of that blue with white for her arms, then you would definitely want to make sure there was a white base underneath it so that the Cover Pink doesn't show through and look kind of bruised. And then I'm going to add a little bit more blue to the sleeves of her dress, like I said, just to give them a little bit of a puffy texture. And now I'm going to be painting her face and all of her facial features. So I'm going to start with her eyes. And here's a funny story about that whole looking bruised thing. A very long time ago, probably, it's not like it's decades, but 4 years ago, in terms of my artist development, that seems like a forever ago. But 4 years ago, I was doing, it might have been longer than that. Okay, that's irrelevant at this point. I was doing a princess design just on my own nails, and I had a dark purple polish underneath it, and it was just acrylic painting on top. And all looked fine until I went and I put top coat on it, and the purple from the polish underneath started bleeding through the acrylic paint, and it made my princess look bruised. It was the worst looking thing I've ever seen in my life. It was horrible. It was absolutely dreadful. All of these morphed colors, it was a disaster. And then I left it on my nails for like a week. Battered and bruised princesses are what everyone wants on their nails. Yeah, so now I know that polish is not for nail art. I still love it. It's gorgeous, but just not for painting on top of. So when you're painting Snow White's face, you want to make sure that you start out with the whites of her eyes and then do just a subtle outlining with brown. That's really going to help out. Just make it not look so harsh, but make sure her eyes are visible. And as you can see, I was struggling with painting her eyes. It was of no fault to the brushes at all. It was all me. It was user malfunction on my part. I don't know what it was. I was like, it wasn't working. So I repainted that one eye about 5 times. Sometimes you gotta do that. And if you do have a situation where it's like that and you just can't get something to paint properly, especially with acrylic paint, there's 2 options of what you can do here. You can try to wipe it off immediately. I don't recommend that, however, because chances are you're just going to smear it. I would let it dry usually, and then take a cotton swab or like a Q-tip dipped in isopropyl alcohol, and then I would erase with the cotton swab. That's going to probably give you the best results. And if that doesn't seem like it's working, or for whatever reason it's stained the acrylic underneath or something like that, you can go through with just to buffer and buff off any of the acrylic residue that's still there. And that is something that is good to know, just because even if it's something you've painted 10 times, if you're like me, maybe your cat walks past you and whaps your arm and your paintbrush goes askew and you need to fix it. So having those fix-its are always something that I like to keep in mind. And then I also added all the other details to her dress, like red on her sleeves and on the bodice and everything like that, outlined subtle here and there. And then I applied a layer of matte top coat, and that is it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you check out those brushes, even if you're giving them for a gift, if you know somebody else who'd like them, or as I said, if you're traveling tech. The case itself, even for that, you could switch out the brushes that are inside and just use the case, or put your favorite brushes in there and keep some of the brushes that came in the kit. It's a pretty good deal, so I would definitely look into that. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!